Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in today. And sorry it took me a moment to go on. It turns out that my cat decided to run off with my windbreaker. And since it ran off with my windbreaker, I had to find that first. And it just so happens that he decided to put it underneath my bed in the far corner that I could not reach. So while I had the starting screen going, I was using an umbrella to try and fish it out from underneath my bed. But thankfully, it is retrieved, and so here I am. And of course, Armored Horns. I'm more than happy that I'm streaming today. It seems like a good schedule for me would be Mondays and Tuesdays. I've been pretty consistent with that. Replace the windbreaker with a dead cat. Oh, that's funny. I think I know what you're talking about as well. Well, let us hope that we do not have any extreme crashes today. But if the Mac does decide to crash, I promise I will get back on as soon as I can. But without further ado, we shall continue on our stories for today. Fingers crossed, yes. It is unfortunate that the Mac that was so graciously lent to me after my laptop was stolen works, but it seems like it has a little trouble keeping up with everything. But at least I'm able to stream one way or another. But without much further ado, I shall continue reading Irish myths and fairy tales to you all. So last time we finished off the section over the Marrow, which is essentially in a way the sea folk. And now we are starting up the new sector involving the solitary fairies. Oh, hello, Shrew. Thank you for coming in. So, this first little bit that I'll read is a bit of an overview and basic information over what they refer to as the solitary fairies. Once upon a time, the Celtic nations worshipped gods of the light, called in Ireland Tathdidan, and corresponding to Jupiter and his fellows, and the gods of the great darkness corresponding to the Centurion Titans. Among the sociable fairies are many of the light gods. Perhaps some day we may learn to look for the dark gods among the solitary fairies. The troping fairies wear green jackets, the solitary ones red. On the red jacket of the leprechaun, according to McAnally, there are 7 rows of buttons, 7 buttons in each row. On the western coast, he says, the red jacket is covered by a frieze one. and in Ulster the creature wears a cocked hat, and when he is up to anything unusually mischievous, leaps on the wall and spins, balancing himself on the point of the hat with his heels in the air. McAnally tells how once a peasant saw a battle between the green jacket fairies and the red. When the green jackets began to win, so delighted was he to see the green above the red that he gave a great shout. In a moment all vanished, and he was flung into the ditch. By many writers on Irish superstition, the following individuals of our elven tribes have been confounded. All of them, indeed, belong to the solitary species of sprites. They have distinct peculiarities and callings. In the traditions and ideas of our peasantry, they are likewise constantly distinguished. How nearly or distantly they claim relationship with the social denizens of the rath may admit of various explanations. The leprechaun, the Leprechaun, and the far Barrig. The name leprechaun, Mr. Douglas Hyde writes to me, is from the Irish Leith Brog, i.e., the one shoemaker, since he is generally seen working at a single shoe. It is spelt in Irish Leith Brogan or Leith Brogan, and is in some places pronounced Lochtreeman, as O'Kearney writes it in that very rare book, the Feast Coinen. I will once again give my disclaimer that I cannot read Irish, so I am doing my best to pronounce how I believe they are to be, but I do apologize for any incorrect pronunciations. The leprechaun, chloricon, and Faiwdarig are these one spirit in different moods and shapes? Hardly two Irish writers are agreed. In many things these three fairies, if three, resemble each other. They are withered, old, and solitary, in every way unlike the sociable spirits of the first sections. They dress with all unfairy homeliness, and are indeed most sluttish, slouching, deering, mischievous phantoms. They are great practical jokers among the good people. The leprechaun makes shoes continuously and has grown very rich. Many treasure crocks buried of old and wartime has he now for his own. In the earliest part of this century, according to Croker, in a newspaper office in Tipperary, they used to show a little shoe forgotten by a leprechaun. The Chloricon, or Clubhair Sanan, in Kearney, makes himself drunk in gentlemen's cellars. Some suppose he is merely the leprechaun on a spree, He is almost unknown in Connacht and the north. Ifar Darig or Fear Derg, which means the red man, for he wears a red cap and a coat, busies himself with practical joking, especially with gruesome joking. This he does, and nothing else. The fear Gorta, or man of hunger, is an emaciated phantom that goes through the land in famine time, begging an alms and bringing good luck to the giver. There are other solitary fairies, such as the house spirit and the water cherie, own brother to the English jack-o'-lantern, the Puka and Banshee. Concerning these, presently, the Dalahan, or headless phantom. One used to stand in a Sligo street on a dark night till lately. The black dog, a form, perhaps, of the Puka. The ships at the Sligo quays are haunted sometimes by this spirit, who announces his presence by a sound like the flinging of all the tin porringers in the world down into the hold. He even follows them to the sea. The Leprechaun, she, or fairy mistress, seeks the love of mortals. If they refuse, she must be their slave. If they consent, they are hers, and can only escape by finding another to take their place. The fairy lives on their life, and they waste away. Death is no escape from her. She is the Gaelic muse, for she gives inspiration to those she persecutes. The Gaelic poets die young, for she is restless, and will not let them remain long on earth, this malignant phantom. Besides these are the divers monsters, the Algishka, or water horse, the Ishtha, highest equaling bestia, or the lake dragon, and such like. But whether these be animals, fairies, or spirits, I know not. And now we begin our first story. This one, in particular, is a set of poetry, so it seems. It is titled The Leprechaun, or The Fairy Shoemaker, and it is acknowledged to William Allingham. Little cowboy, what have you heard up on the lonely Rath green mound? Only the plaintive yellow bird, sighing in sultry fields around. Cherry, 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 chee. Only the grasshopper and the bee. Tip tap, rip rap, tick-a-tack-a-too. Scarlet leather sewn together, this will make a shoe. Left, right, pull it tight. Summer days are warm, underground in winter. laughing at the storm. Lay your ear close to the hill. Do not catch the tiny clamor, busy click of an elfin hammer, voice of the leprechaun singing shrill as he merrily plies his trade. He's a span and a quarter in height. Get him in sight, hold him tight, and you're a made man. You watch your cattle this summer day, sup on potatoes, sleep in the hay. How would you like to roll in your carriage? Look for a duchess's daughter in marriage. Seize the shoemaker, then you may. Big boots a-hunting, scandals in the hall, white for a wedding feast, pink for a ball. This way, that way, so we make a shoe, getting rich every stitch. Tic-tac-toe. Huh. Hello, Game Crazy. Thank you for coming in, and thank you so much for the biddies. 99 treasure crocks this keen miser fairy hath, hidden mountains, woods, and rocks, ruin and round tower, cave and rath, and where the cormorants build, from times of old, guarded by him, each of them filled full to the brim with gold. I cannot linger long. I have plans to watch the two towers with friends, but I shall be lurking. Well, that sounds like a wonderful time, my dear. I hope you enjoy it. And thank you so much for lurking. I caught him at work one day myself, in the castle ditch where foxglove grows, a wrinkled, wizened, and bearded elf, spectacles stuck on his pointed nose, silver buckles to his hose, leather apron, shoe in his lap, rip-rap, tip-tap, tack, tick-too. A grasshopper on my cap, away the moth flew. Buskins for a fairy prince, brogues for his son. Pay me well, when the job is done. The rogue was mine beyond a doubt. I stared at him, he stared at me. Servant, sir, he says, and pulled a snuff box out. He took a long pitch, looking better pleased. The queer little leprechaun offered the box with a whimsical grace. Oof! He flung the dust in my face, and while I sneezed, was gone. I know I've been on the internet too long when that last segment just made me think of pocket sand. And I haven't even really watched King of the Hill. The next story is called Master and Man, attributed to T. Crofton Crocker. Billy McDaniel was once a likely was once as likely a young man as ever shook his broke at a patron, a festival in honor of a patron saint, emptied a quart, or handled a shilling, fearing for naught but the want of drink, caring for nothing but who should pay for it, and thinking of nothing but how to make fun over it. Drunk or sober, a word and a blow was ever the way with Billy McDaniel. And a mighty easy way it was. And a mighty easy way it is of either getting into or of ending a dispute. More is the pity that, through the means of his thinking, and fearing, and caring for nothing, this same Billy McDaniel fell into bad company. For surely the good people are the worst of all company anyone could come across. It so happened that Billy was going home one clear frosty night, not long after Christmas. The moon was round and bright, but although it was as fine a night as heart could wish for, he felt pinched with cold. "By my word," chattered Billy, "the drop of good liquor would be no bad thing to keep a man's soul from freezing in him. And I wish I had a full measure of the best." "Never wish it twice, Billy," said a little man in a three-cornered hat, bound all about with gold lace, and with great silver buckles in his shoes, so big that it was a wonder how he could carry them, and he held out a glass as big as himself, filled with as good liquor as any eye looked upon or lip tasted. "Success, my little fellow," said Billy McDaniel, nothing daunted, though he well knew the little man to belong to the good people. "Here's your health anyway, and thank you kindly, no matter who pays for the drink." And he took the glass and drained it to the very bottom without ever taking a second breath to it. "Success," said the little man, "and you're heartily welcome, Billy, but don't think to cheat me as you have done others. Out with your purse and pay me like a gentleman." "Is it I pay you?" said Billy. "Could I not just take you up and put you in my pocket as easily as a blackberry?" "Billy McDaniel," said the little man, getting very angry, "you shall be my servant for 7 years and a day, and that is the way I will be paid. So make ready to follow me." One would be quite foolish to not pay for what they take, especially when involving non-human or mortal people. But nonetheless, when Billy heard this, he began to be very sorry for having used such bold words toward the little man, and he felt himself, yet could not tell how, obliged to follow the little man the livelong night about the country, up and down, over hedge and ditch, through bog and brake, without any rest. When the morning began to dawn, the little man turned round to him and said, "You may now go home, Billy. But on your peril, don't fail to meet me in the fort field tonight. Or, if you do, it may be the worse for you in the long run. I will find you a good servant, and you will find me an indulgent master." Home went Billy McDaniel, and though he was tired and weary enough, never a wink of sleep could he get for thinking of the little man. But he went, but he was afraid not to do his bidding. So up he got in the evening, and away he went to the fort field. He was not long there before the little man came towards him and said, "Billy, I want to go a long journey tonight, so saddle one of my horses, and you may saddle another for yourself, as you are to go along with me, and you may be tired after your walk last night." Billy thought this very considerate of his master, and thanked him accordingly. "But," said he, "if I may be so bold, sir, I would ask which is the way to your stable, for never a thing do I see but the fort here, and the old thorn tree at the corner of the field, and the stream running at the bottom of the hill, with a bit of bog over against us." "Ask no questions, Billy," said the little man, "but go over to that bit of bog and bring me 2 of the strongest rushes you can find." Billy did accordingly, wondering what the little man would be at, and he picked 2 of the stoutest rushes he could find, with a little bunch of brown blossoms stuck at the side of each, and brought them back to his master. "Get up, Billy," said the little man, taking one of the rushes from him and striding across it. "Where shall I get up, please your honor?" said Billy. "Why, upon horseback, like me to be sure," said the little man. "Is it after making a fool of me you'd be," said Billy, "pitying me to get horseback upon that bit of rush? Maybe you want to persuade me that the rush I pulled out but a while ago out of the bog over there is a horse?" "Up, up, and no words," said the little man, looking very angry. "The best horse you ever rode, but a fool to it." So Billy, thinking all this it was in joke, and fearing to vex his master, straddled across the rush. "Boram, boram, boram," cried the little man 3 times, which in English seems to become great, which in English means to become great. And Billy did the same after him. Presently the rushes swelled up into fine horses, and away they went full speed. But Billy, who had put the rush between his legs, without minding how he did it, found himself sitting on horseback the wrong way, which was rather awkward, with his face to the horse's tail, and so quickly had his steed started off with him that he had no power to turn round, and therefore was nothing for it but to hold on by the tail. At last they came to their journey's end and stopped at the gate of a fine house. "Now, Billy," said the little man, "do as you see me do, and follow me close. But as you did not know your horse's head from his tail, mind that your own head does not spin round until you can't tell whether you're standing on it or on your heels. For remember that old liquor, though able to make a cat speak, can make a man dumb." The little man then said some queer kind of words, out of which Billy could make no meaning, but he contrived to say them after him for all that, and in they both went through the keyhole of the door. And though through one keyhole after another, until they got into the wine cellar, which was well stored with all kinds of wine. The little man fell to drinking as hard as he could, and Billy, no way disliking the example, did the same. "The best of masters you are, surely," said Billy to him. "No matter who is the next, and well pleased will I be with your service, if you continue to give me plenty to drink." "I have made no bargain with you," said the little man, "and will make none, but up and follow me." And away they went through keyhole after keyhole, and each mounting upon the rush which he had left at the hall door, scampered off, kicking the clouds before them like snowballs, and soon as the words "Boram, Boram, Boram" had passed their lips, when they came back to the fort field, the little man dismissed Billy, bidding him to be there the next night at the same hour. Thus did they go on night after night, shaping their course one night here and another night there, sometimes north, sometimes east, and sometimes south, until there was not a gentleman's wine cellar in all Ireland that they had not visited, and could tell the flavour of every wine in it as well, aye, better than the butler himself. One night when Billy McDaniel met the little man as usual in the fort field, and was going to the bog to fetch the horses for their journey, his master said to him, "Billy, I shall want another horse tonight, or may be we may bring back more company than we take." So Billy, who now knew better than to question any order given to him by his master, brought forth a third rush, much wondering who it would be that would travel back in their company, and whether he was about to have a fellow servant. "If I have," thought Billy, "he shall go and fetch the horses from the bog every night, or I don't see why I am not, every inch of me, as good a gentleman as my master. Well, away they went, Billy leading the third horse, and never stopped until they came to a snug farmer's house in the country Limerick, close under the old castle of Carrincogneil, that was built, they say, by the great Brian Boru. Within the house there was a great carousing going forward, and the little man stopped outside for some time to listen, and turning round all of a sudden, he said, "Billy, I will be 1,000 years old tomorrow." "God bless us, sir," said Billy. "Will you?" "Don't say those words again, Billy," said the little old man, "or you will be my ruin forever." "Now, Billy, as I will be 1,000 years in the world tomorrow, I think it is full time for me to get married." "I think so too, without any kind of doubt at all," said Billy, "if you ever mean to marry." "And to that purpose," said the little man, "I have come all the way to Carrincogneil, for in this house, this very night, is young Darby Riley going to be married to Bridget Rooney, and as she is a tall and comely girl, and has come of decent people, I think of marrying her myself and taking her off with me." "And what will Darby Riley say to that?" said Billy. "Silence," said the little man, putting on a mighty severe look. "I did not bring you here with me to ask questions." And without holding further argument, he began saying the queer words which had the power of passing him through the keyhole as free as air, and which Billy thought himself mighty clever to be able to say after him. In they both went, and for the better viewing the company, the little man perched himself up as nimbly as a cock sparrow upon one of the big beams which went across the house over all their heads, and Billy did the same upon another facing him, but not as much accustomed to roosting in such a place. His legs hung down as untidy as may be, and it was quite clear he had not taken pattern after the way in which the little man had bundled himself up together. If the little man had been a tailor all his life, he could not have sat more contentedly upon his haunches. So there they were, both master and man, looking down upon the fun that was going forward, and under them were the priest and the piper, and the father of Darby Riley, with Darby's 2 brothers and his uncle's son, and there were both the father and mother of Bridget Rooney, and proud enough the old couple were that night for their daughter, as good right as they had, and her 4 sisters, with brand new ribbons in their caps, and her 3 brothers, all looking as clean and as clever as any 3 boys in Munster. And there were uncles and aunts, and gossips and cousins enough besides to make a full house of it, and plenty was there to eat and drink on the table for every one of them, if there had been double the number. Now, as it happened, just as Miss Rooney had helped his reverence to the first cut of the pig's head which was placed before her, beautifully bolstered up with white savoys, that the bride gave a sneeze, which made everyone at the table start, but not a soul said God bless us, all thinking that the priest would have done so, as he ought if he had done his duty. No one wished to take the word out of his mouth, but unfortunately he was preoccupied with pig's head and greens. And after a moment's pause, the fun and merriment of the bridal feast went on without the pious benediction. Of this circumstance, both Billy and his master were no inattentive spectators from their exalted stations. "Ah!" exclaimed the little man, throwing one leg from under him with a joyous flourish. His eye twinkled with a strange light, whilst his eyebrows became elevated into the curvature of Gothic arches. "Ah!" said he, leering down at the bride, and then up at Billy. "I have half of her now, surely. Let her sneeze but twice more, and she is mine, in spite of the priest's masked book and Darby Riley." Again the fair Bridget sneezed, but it was so gently, and she blushed so much, that few except the little man took, or seemed to take any notice, and no one thought of saying God bless us. Billy all this time regarded the poor girl with the most rueful expression of countenance, for he could not help but thinking what a terrible thing it was for a nice young girl of 19, with large blue eyes, transparent skin, and dimpled cheeks, suffused with health and joy, to be obliged to marry an ugly little bit of a man who was 1,000 years old, barring a day. At this critical moment, the bride gave a third sneeze, and Billy roared out with all his might, "God save us!" Whether this exclamation resulted from his soliloquy or from mere force of habit, he never could tell exactly himself, but no sooner was it uttered that the little man, his face glowing with rage and disappointment, sprung from the beam on which he had perched himself, shrieking out in a shrill voice of a cracked bagpipe, "I discharge you from my service, Billy McDaniel. Take that for your wages." He gave poor Billy a most furious kick in the back, which sent his unfortunate servant sprawling upon his face and hands right in the middle of the supper table. If Billy was astonished, how much more so was every one of the company into which he was thrown with so little ceremony. But when they heard his story, Father Cooney laid down his knife and fork and married the young couple out of hand with all speed, and Billy McDaniel danced the rinka at the wedding, and plenty he did drink so, which was what he thought more of than dancing. Hydration break. This next story is called simply The Leprechaun and is attributed to Lady Wilde. The leprechauns, or lithe brogan, meeting artisans of the baroque, are merry, industrious, tricksy little sprites who do all the shoemaker's work and the tailors and the cobblers for the fairy gentry, and are often seen at sunset under the hedge, singing and stitching. They know all the secrets of hidden treasure, and if they take a fancy to a person, will guide him to the spot in the fairy raft where the pot of gold lies buried. It is believed that a fairy now living near Castlera came by their riches in a strange way. All thought the good offices of a friendly leprechaun, and the legend had been passed down through many generations as an established fact. There was a poor boy once, one of their forefathers, who used to drive his cart of turf daily back and forth, and made what money he could by the sale. But he was a strange boy, very silent and moody, and the people said he was a fairy changeling, for he joined in no sports, and scarcely ever spoke up to anyone, but spent the nights reading all the old bits of books he picked up in his rambles. The one thing he longed for above all others was a way to get rich, and to be able to give up the old weary turf cart, and to live in peace and quietness all alone, with nothing but books around him, in a beautiful house and garden all by himself. Well, that does sound quite nice, I would say. Now, he had read in the old books how the leprechauns knew all the secret places where gold lay hid, and day by day he watched for a sight of the little cobbler, and listened for the click, click of his hammer as he sat under the hedge mending the shoes. Oh, hello there, Mick Goliath. Thank you so much for coming in. At last, one evening, just as the sun set, he saw a little fellow under a dock leaf, working away, dressed in all green, with a cocked hat on his head. So the boy jumped down from the cart and seized him by the neck. Now that is quite interesting that they say he was dressed in all green, when just before we had read that they are more commonly known for being in red. And I see we have some new followers. Thank you, Mick Goliath, and to Silent Storm too, for becoming followers. Thank you for joining me. Now don't you stir from this, he cried, till you tell me where to find the hidden gold. Easy now, said the leprechaun. Don't hurt me, and I will tell you all about it. But mind you, I could hurt you if I choose, for I have the power but I won't do it, for we are cousins once removed. So, as we are near relations, I'll just be good and show you the place of the secret gold that none can have or keep except those of fairy blood and race. Come along with me, then, to the old Fort Lippenshaw, for there it lies. But make haste, for when the last red glow of the sun vanishes, the gold will disappear also, and you will never find it again. Come off then, said the boy, and he carried the leprechaun into the turf cart and drove off. And in a second they were at the old fort, and went in through the door made in the stone wall. Now look round, said the leprechaun, and the boy saw the whole ground covered in gold pieces, and there were vessels of silver lying about in such plenty that all the riches of the world seemed gathered there. Now take what you want, said the leprechaun, but hasten, for if that door shuts, you will never leave this place as long as you live. So the boy gathered up his arms full of gold and silver and flung them into the cart. And on his way back for more, when the door shut with a clap like thunder, all the place became dark again, and he saw no more of the leprechaun, and had not even to thank him. So he thought it best to drive home at once with his treasure. And when he arrived and was all alone by himself, he counted his riches, and all the bright yellow gold pieces, enough for a king's ransom. And he was very wise, and told no one, but went off next day to Dublin, and put all his treasures into the bank, and found that he was now indeed as rich as a lord. So he ordered a fine house to be built, with a spacious gardens, and he had servants and carriages and books to his heart's content. And he gathered all the wise men round him to give him the learning of a gentleman, and he became a great and powerful man in the country, where his memory is still held in high honor, and his descendants are living to this day rich and prosperous, for their wealth never decreased, though they have ever given largely to the poor, and are noted above all things for the friendly heart and the liberal hand. But the leprechauns can be bitterly malicious if they are offended, and one should be very cautious in dealing with them, and treat them with great civility, or they will take revenge and never reveal the secret of their hidden gold. One day a young lad was out in the fields at work when he saw a little fellow, not the height of his hand, mending shoes under a dock leaf. And he went over, never taking his eyes off him, for fear that he would vanish away. And when he got quite close, he made a grab for the creature, and lifted him up and put him in his pocket. Then he ran away as fast as he could, and when he had the leprechaun safe in the house, He tied him by the iron chain to the hob. Oof, that sounds awful. Now tell me, he said, where am I to find a pot of gold? Let me know the place, or I'll punish you. I know of no pot of gold, said the leprechaun, but let me go that I may finish mending the shoes. Then I'll make you tell me, said the lad. And with that he made down a great fire, and put the little fellow on it and scorched him. Oh, take me off, cried the leprechaun, and I'll tell you, just there under the dock leaf, where you found me, there is a pot of gold. Go, dig and find. So the lad was delighted, and ran to the door, but it so happened that his mother was coming in with a pail of fresh milk, and in his haste he knocked the pail out of her hand, and all the milk was spilt on the floor. Then, when the mother saw the leprechaun, she grew very angry and beat him. "Go away, you little wretch," she cried. "You have overlooked the milk and brought ill luck." And she kicked him out of the house. But the lad ran off to find the dock leaf, though he had come back very sorrowful in the evening, for he had dug and dug nearly down to the middle of the earth, but not a pot of gold was to be seen. The same night the husband was coming home from his work, and when he passed the old fort he heard voices and laughter, and one said, "They are looking for a pot of gold," but they little knew that the crock of gold is lying down in the bottom of the old quarry, hidden under some stones close by the garden wall. But whoever gets it must go of a dark night at 12 o'clock, and beware of bringing his wife with him. So the man hurried home and told his wife he would go that very night, for it was dark black, and she must stay home and watch for him, and not stir from the house till he came back. Then he went out into the dark night alone. Now, thought the wife, when he was gone, if I could only get to the quarry before him, I would have the pot of gold all to myself, while if he gets it, I shall have nothing. And with that she went out and ran like the wind until she reached the quarry, and then she began to creep down very quietly into the black dark. But a great stone was in her path, and she stumbled over it, and fell down and down till she reached the bottom, and there she lay groaning, for her leg was broken by the fall. Just then her husband came to the edges of the quarry, and began to descend, but when he heard the groans he was frightened. "Cross of Christ about us," he exclaimed. "What is down below? Is it evil, or is it good? Oh, come down and help me," cried the woman. "It's your wife is here, and my leg is broken, and I'll die if you don't help me." "And is that my pot of gold?" exclaimed the poor man. "Only my wife with a broken leg lying at the bottom of the quarry." and he was at his wits' end to know what to do, for the night was so dark he could not see a hand before him. So he roused up a neighbor, and between them they dragged up the poor woman and carried her home and laid her on the bed half dead from fright, and it was many a day before she was able to get round as usual. Indeed, she limped all her life long, so that the people said the curse of the leprechaun was on her. But as to the pot of gold, from that day to this, not one of the family, father or son, or any belonging to them, ever set eyes on it. However, the little leprechaun still sits under the dock leaf of the hedge and laughs at them as he mends the shoes with his little hammer. Tick-tack, tick-tack. But they are afraid to touch him, for now they know he can take revenge. And that, my darlings, was the final story for today. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today, as I had the honor of reading to y'all many different stories. I do hope my voice and my stories were somewhat soothing to y'all in whichever way is best for you. And thankfully, it seems that we had no crashes this time. But I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. You could be anywhere in the world, but you were brought in by my glimmer and chose to stay with me. And for that, I'm truly thankful. But let me see if I have any companions who might be on today doing similar stuff. So it doesn't seem that anyone doing anything calming is going on right now. And so, for the sake of those who were joining me for a calm night, I suppose I will call it here. But I will be streaming tomorrow at 5 p.m. CST, reading more stories to y'all. But until we next meet, and until I see you once again, I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. And until then, I must bid you adieu. Good night and goodbye. May my glimmer continue to shine in your hearts and minds. For until we next meet, my dears, ta-ta!